Joining us is a gentleman who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to Oropouche West MP and UNC Shadow Minister of Finance, Dave Tancoo. Pleasant good evening, sir.
Pleasant good night, Mikey, and good evening to your listeners online. I wish you all the best for the night coming and the rest of the days going forward until we remove this PNM government from office.
Thank you so much. I must say you sound like you've had quite a day, so I know there's a lot going on. To begin with, 2024 revenue may be $3 billion less than projected. Finance
That's
Minister says. Yeah. What's going
That's
on?
an absolute lie. And I want to prove that. I'm glad you raised it as the first issue. This was without prompting. The Minister of Finance in the Parliament said that the figure was going to be about $3 billion. The revenue shortfall was going to be about $3 billion. It's ironic that the very same minister, I think 3 or 4 days before, in an affidavit before the court, said that the deficit was going to be to the tune of about $5 billion. Not 3, not 4, but $5 billion. And the reason that that becomes an issue, my friend, is because that's a $2 billion debt difference. Now, the minister could come to Parliament and mislead as much as he wants. He could come to Parliament and mislead because he's protected under parliamentary privilege. So we can't hold him liable for lying. But in the court document, he was very clear. The court document is a public document. And on page, it's item 22, I will read it with you. The fall in oil and gas prices and lower than expected production of oil and gas has had a profound impact on the country's petroleum revenues, leading to a projected shortfall in revenue for 2024 of $5 billion TT dollars. Not the $3 billion he came to the parliament to say, because in parliament, like I said, he could lie. So he literally, deliberately understated the fact that the revenue streams have collapsed by $5 billion, not $3 billion. So we are in a much worse case than the minister prefers to let the country know. Why would a minister lie about something so straightforward? Only the minister could tell us that. It's clear to me that what the intention was, it was to mislead the population into thinking that things are bad, but not as bad as it really is. $5 billion, he understated that by $2 billion. Only a minister of finance named Colin Wood could tell this country why he lied to the population.
But he told us, Mr. Tancoo, that between then and now, there have been fluctuations in the prices of oil and natural gas. And he says, when one looks at the adjustments that we have to make, we are now projecting a lower figure for the revenue because we have to be pragmatic. So why was this not before being pragmatic? Is it that the budget 2023-2024 is an election budget?
I think, well, the election budget is from the other side. That is why he's hiding the true state of the economy. He's hiding the true state of the economy because he's going to come now to borrow money. The deficit is not the kind of figures he has been calling. Remind me, I will give you the true deficit as well. The problem that the minister has is that he spent more money than he's earned and therefore has to borrow to cover up the difference. What he's going to borrow is not what he's telling us now. How he's going to raise that revenue is not what he's telling us now, but he's signaled two things. He's signaled that they're going to withdraw from the consolidated fund,
You're right.
and he signaled that they're going to try to save expenditure, and he specified on social transfers and subsidies and so on. Those are like the grants and the gate funding and so on, social expenditure. That's where he's going to cut expenditure that way, and he's going to raise revenue the other way. But that too is misleading. He came to the parliament to ask for $2.3 billion more in revenue for him to spend, $2.3 billion. But none of that, all of that money was to pay arrears. That's to pay money they already owed. That is to pay money that they have no choice but to pay because it's already been expended. We go arrears, arrears, arrears. Every time you look at the items of expenditure, you see arrears, gratuity, loan payments. Some of these things are predictable. But they understated the estimates of expenditure at the start of the year, again, to mislead the international lending agencies, to give them a good credit rating, to mislead the World Bank and the IMF, to mislead the country generally into how bad the state really, really is. The state of our country is a total mess.
Yeah.
Total mess. And this affidavit that he had to file in court is the best example of how bad Trinidad and Tobago is.
Yeah,
It
because
is in a really bad state.
what we really witness, Mr. Tancoo, is not a change in as far as our life as citizens being elevated, our communities, by extension, the country. We get a lot of talk, and we hear it over and over again. The fact that they're saying that the IMF, and there's a lot of verbal acrobatics here, the IMF is stating that the economy was at its strongest level in a decade. And the finance minister said the country, under the PNM, had never dodged IMF Article 6 consultations, which all IMF members were obliged to undertake.
That's a con job again. The IMF, now I looked at the IMF report, almost 200 pages of it. I read the entire thing cover to cover because I'm a finance person, so I understand the language in there. But that information that the IMF is basing its dissemination on is based on foundation. That foundation is data given by the PNM, given by the Minister of Finance. So the IMF conclusions are based on information provided by the Minister of Finance. And I already said they underestimated the expenditure, they underestimated the revenue. Sorry, they underestimated the expenditure and overestimated the revenue, so that they will create a nice picture of, the economy is not doing so bad. But the IMF consultation document, the report that they did, the Article 4 consultation, already has errors in it. Two of the things that I pointed out during the debate for the media review. One, international reserve coverage is expected to remain adequate at 7.5 months of prospective total imports. It's not 7.5, it is 6.8. So already the IMF report is wrong. And that is what they use to base their conclusion that the country is going well. The other thing they said is that the fiscal position is projected to remain adequate, reaching a deficit of 2.7% of GDP in fiscal year 2024. That means that, well, let me answer that. They were saying, based on the information the minister provided, that the fiscal deficit will be 2.7% of GDP. You know how much it is? It is over 6%. So again, we are earning we are earning less than we are spending by substantial amounts, and we're going to have to borrow more. So the IMF report already started off with misinformation, and therefore their conclusions are wrong. I have publicly challenged the IMF to come back and review this thing with true information, at least on the media review, and correct the errors, because what they're concluding is based on the information that is wrong. The Minister of Finance gave them wrong information. We now have the true information, and therefore the IMF projection, all this thing about the first time in a decade and the best for 14 years, all of that is foolishness and wrong. Plus, even the IMF statement for the first time in a decade, you know when the decade is? The decade is 10 years, so 2014. We had the best time in 2014. Our economy was growing in 2014. Substantial foreign reserves, substantial revenue streams coming in, employment, every indicator, every economic indicator in 2014 was the best over our 5-year period, 2014. So you're talking about a decade. I think the IMF really got misled by the Minister of Finance, and therefore all the ministers focused on is this one line. You notice he hasn't spoken about the fact that the IMF was wrong about its import our foreign reserves.
He hasn't mentioned that, about the foreign reserves.
And he hasn't mentioned the fact that the IMF was also wrong about the deficit. The minister is cherry picking from the IMF report only the pieces that he wants to fool the population with. But the population is too smart for that. We're too bright for that.
Yeah, but Mr. Tancoo, it also becomes a lot more confusing when you have like the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce praising the Minister of Finance and the government for the economic initiatives outlined in this mid-year review. To go on, and they added that they believe that some of the measures mentioned by the Minister of Finance will lead to increased business opportunities, job creation, and sustainable growth for Trinidad and Tobago. Are we all on the same page? I mean, I understand that we're not all experiencing the same thing. There are many who are below the poverty line. The middle class has been wiped out. But is there some sort of a lack of reality by some of these institutions who are weighing in on the current state of the economy?
I want to be very generous to the business community and say that I think that they were misinformed. Firstly, they're saying that this media review had many ideas and great economic impetus measures that would create and stimulate the economy. I just said at the start, And the minister himself said that the media review is a simple statement of the state of the economy. There's no new initiatives in there. There's nothing in there that will create a single job. There's nothing in there that will stimulate a single industry. There's no new initiative. So for them to say, the media review is such a beacon of hope, unfortunately, they are either mistaken or misleading. And I prefer to believe that they are mistaken. I really wouldn't want to believe that the business community, especially chambers of commerce, which are supposed to reflect the interests of the business community generally, I wouldn't want to believe that they are misleading the population intentionally.
Yeah, and then added to the fact with the current crime situation, I mean, all of these things would have to be considered. One would think coming with a review, we would start looking at many of these social ills and try to see how best they can be addressed. Healthcare, the education system, and of course crime being the number one that I mentioned. Nothing was brought forward. Is it basically that government is just buying time into the next general election?
I think that they are. You see, but I want you to bear in mind one thing. When the Minister of Finance spoke and when the Prime Minister spoke, they said things were great. The country was doing well. And if you think people are suffering, look and see in the Queen's Park Savannah, you can't get space to park. Look on the roads, they have traffic. They believe living in this bubble, they believe that the country is doing well. And if you believe that the country is doing well, you are not going to take any action to try to improve circumstances because you think the country is doing well. That is why we have this high crime rate. That is why we have mass unemployment. That is why we have high food prices causing people to be driven into poverty. That's why we have crises in every single aspect from infrastructure, come all the way up to healthcare and education, violence in schools, etc. Because this government, these ministers are living in a bubble, secured by private security and government-sponsored security. They don't know truthfully what is happening in the rest of the country. You and I, who live in the real world, we know that people are suffering. We know that people are under substantial duress. And I'm predicting, my friend, that because the government will make no action to improve social circumstances because they believe that people are doing well, we will get progressively worse as we are going along. That is why they brought property tax on our backs. They brought property tax on our backs because they were convinced that people living well. Nothing is wrong. People living well. They have extra money to go and pay to go to some fete. That is the thinking that this government expressed, stated plainly in the media review. Stated plainly.
Last night I had economist Indira Sajuan on, and she made it quite clear that government has no plan outside of the energy sector as far as generating revenue. So basically it's tax to death, which brings me to the point of the opposition leader when, of course, bringing proof that government considered an increase in value added tax to raise revenue. Now, the government is denying that, but Kamla Prasad Bisesa has presented the proof at one of the last meetings that took place. Is it a matter of that we're just going to be, as I said, buying in time, and all of these things are going to be implemented if it is that the government, this administration returns?
Well, I want to say, I'm glad you raised that issue because the Minister of Finance has said that Kamla Prasad Bisesa was wrong. Nobody is going to raise any tax. Nobody is going to raise any issues, etc. But she provided, in fact, when she raised it, the Prime Minister said, and he pointed to everybody, I can give you the assurance and I speak without fear of condemnation and repute. I forget the language that he used, but basically he was very clear that this never happened. There was no such tax coming. There was no such increase in costs coming. There was no such penalties on people coming. None of these are true. And the leader was very careful to say, be careful, I have the document. He insisted nothing was true. Now we have what is called a cabinet note. Now I want to tell you, I used to sit in cabinet behind the leader of she was then Prime Minister. I used to sit in cabinet behind her as her financial advisor. I know the process of a cabinet note. Nothing comes to the cabinet for consideration unless it passes through the Minister of Finance. In this case, it's a finance bill, a finance note. It had to come through the approval and the request of the Minister of Finance, and a cabinet note is proposed government policy. It is proposed policy. So all these actions that are proposed here, it went through consideration. All the taxes that are coming, all the collapse, the increased fees and penalties, all the reduction in expenditure, personal expenditure in subsidies and in current transfers, etc. all of those things are going to be government policies. They just get caught lying to the population.
Yeah, because a cabinet goes through a process, and it's not something that it just easily comes about. He made it
No,
quite clear.
it's policy. When it comes to by the time it gets to cabinet, the minister bringing it has already gone through the processes and so on and so on. This is no longer thesis. This is for the purpose of implementation and agreement by the cabinet to implement. That is what this is.
Then let me ask you on the takeaway from this entire mid-year review. What are we looking at as far as the future? If there's no activity outside of the energy sector, I mean, we're hearing all things bandied about, Dragon Gas deal, all of these deals. But the reality here, Mr. Tancoo, is that basically we don't have much to look forward to.
Oh no, my friend. I think what we have to look forward to is a greater crisis. A much greater crisis. The economy has collapsed. Our foreign exchange reserves, for example, are almost the same as our foreign debt. We are spending $1 billion. So right now the difference between our foreign exchange reserves and our foreign exchange holdings is $221 million. That's it, $221 million US dollars. And the minister just recently said that we spend over $1 billion per month. So already we're in a crisis, we're in a foreign exchange crisis. Plus, when I indicated earlier, I told you I wanted to go back to the deficit. The deficit that the minister talks about is what is called a fiscal deficit. That's what he wants you to focus on. But we don't approve in the parliament the budget statement, which is the fiscal deficit. We approve what are in the estimates of expenditure. And the estimates of expenditure, the amount of money, if persons go through the book which is online, go look at the estimates of revenue in particular. On Roman numeral 5 page, they were proposing at the start of the year to borrow $13.2 billion at the start of the year. They've now increased the amount of expenditure, which means they now have to finance $15.5 billion. But when you add in the reduction in revenue, so they have less revenue, because the revenue would have written off some of the expenditure. We are looking at something to the tune of $18.5 billion in borrowing that this country has to do to finish fiscal 2024, which ends in September. We now have to borrow $18.5 billion for fiscal 2024. $5 billion more than they estimated. This is a substantial amount of money because having to borrow to spend on arrears, having to borrow to spend on projects that are not generating a foreign exchange dollar, not generating a new revenue stream. This government is simply borrowing to pay debt. And they said that in the media review, in our discussions, they said that we were making a big issue about something, about this and that, but you must borrow to pay debt. We are borrowing to pay debt. You think about it. You have a debt of $5 and you pay an interest rate of $2. And you now go back to the bank to borrow that $7. You have now borrowed to pay back interest and revenue. So your borrowing is not going to be the $5 that you have to pay off. You're going to borrow for the $2 interest you also have to pay.
Yeah.
So you are borrowing more money. That means that the future generations are going to be further indebted. We are in such a huge debt crisis right now. We are at the highest level of debt in our country's history, with nothing being done to create new revenue streams to pay off that debt. All we're doing is borrowing money to spend behind debt.
And that's scary, really and truly scary. Let me get to the other issue here. You are vying for the position of chairman, the upcoming UNC internal elections that's carded for this Saturday, June 15. Quite interesting. If we go back to the Londonville meeting at Signature Hall, the opposition leader, the political leader of the UNC, said, "This is the first time I have seen so many outside groups and parties attempting to harass UNC members." What can we take from that? Because, I mean, we just had a discussion on the economy. The fact that the middle class has been wiped out. So much ills and wrongs are taking place. One would think that would be the main focus. Did you ever think in your life something that you represent and you stand for would come under attack, losing focus of what needs to be looked at for the interests of the people?
Let me say this. I don't think anybody in the country, well, any right-thinking citizen in this country wants to see the opposition, the UNC, At this point, we are the opposition. I don't think anyone wants to see a UNC that is divided amongst itself or within itself. I think everybody wants to see the UNC move forward. Now, we have been moving forward. We showed that in the last local government election, when we got almost 55,000 more votes than the PNM did, and we fought less seats than they did. What that tells you is that the UNC is now at an upward momentum. Unfortunately, when we are on an upward momentum, the PNM, given what I just told you about the state of the country and the state of the economy, needs to have a distraction. So all of a sudden, we find colleagues whose focus is not the same as ours. Their focus seems to be to disseminate and to disrupt the smooth flow of the UNC into government. They seem to be anxious, and it's interesting because while we are opposing the PNM, some of my colleagues seem to be opposing us. We don't seem to be on the same agenda going forward. They have openly said that they cannot work with the political leader. Now, the political leader will remain the political leader after June 15th. But if the head is there now, for effective functioning organization, you need the head and the body to be working together. If you have the body not working with the head, so the body is going left and the head is going right, you're dead. If you have the head going right and the body going left, you're dead. If you have both body and head working together, then we will make progress. So you have to be going in the same direction. They have already signaled that they can't work with the head. So just body cannot work with the head. The current NATEX has been working with the political leader. The gains we got from local government election was based on structure, strategy, planning, and execution by this national executive. And I believe that we will continue to build. I think the population is very clear. They understand where we are going. They are not being misled and misguided by PNM propaganda and PNM old talk and PNM mantras. We've been there, but the population is smart enough to know that this misdirection can only cost this country. The only people who benefit when the US is split is the PNM. I think the country knows that, and I expect that they will show overwhelmingly support for the stars when they vote in the internal election. I think the members will vote significantly in favor of the 17 stars, so that we as a party, the UNC, will have both the body and the head continuing to work for government.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pick sense from nonsense here. I mean, a lot of talk that has been going around is the fact that the political leader is a hindrance for the young people who want to come up and be a part of the party. But then I have to ask the question, then who is Michelle Benjamin? Who is Saddam Hussein? Who is even Anita Haynes? Who is Vandana Mohammed?
Exactly. All of those persons, including Anita, ironically, have benefited by the political leaders' open willingness to take persons who had no political experience and bring them into the system and groom them so that they become members of parliament. Saddam, Michelle, Vandana, Anita, like you said, several others. What we have is a mixture and a leader who is willing to mix youth and experience so that we get the best benefit of both worlds. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues seem to be inclined to distract from that and mislead the population into thinking otherwise. But the facts present themselves clearly. You have in the Senate, you have veterans like Senator Wade Mark, but you also have young blood. We have Jayanti, we have had Neil Gosselin, for example. We have lots of young people being present, both in the Senate and in the lower house. And councillors as well. Yeah. And councillors as well. The leader of the United National Congress and the National Executive have made it a deliberate choice to pick the best of the best. And it has happened that some of the best have been young persons, some have been not so young persons, and some have been persons with substantially more experience. And you need a combination of all. You need a combination of all in order to move forward.
Understood. Final question. What does this internal election mean for you? I mean, politically and personally, please share with us.
I have spent, my friend, the last 35, in fact, it's about 38 years of my life. Since 1986, I have been involved in the politics of this country as an activist, as a typist, as a community leader, as a ground soldier, as a street captain, as General Secretary, now as Chairman, I have spent the vast majority of my life building this party to a point where I think we are again ready for government. And it will hurt my heart to see any attempt, it does hurt my heart to see any attempt to break it down. What we have been doing, and what I have been doing, is speaking about the positives that the party has achieved, so that we can show that country that we as a party are able, strong, and willing and experienced to move forward. What my colleagues opposite, who seem to be interested in only condemning the party and the party membership, that's a different agenda. My agenda is to continue to build, because I really do believe that this country cannot take another day, another week, another month, another 5 years of this PNM, heartless PNM government. So for me, it is all about continuing to build the party. And I respectfully suggest that the star slate, led by Kamala Persad-Bissessar, has demonstrated the ability to build this party to the point where even those persons on the opposite side seem to be desperate to get it.
Mr. Tancoo, I want to thank you so much for taking time out. Best of luck to you and the entire team on Saturday. Keep up the good work, and we'll be speaking to you after the 15th.
Thank you. Vote for the stars, my friend. Vote for the stars.
Thank you.